I'm Pastor Mark Buetow, and this is another Higher Things video short. For Bible 101, as we pick up with the story of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Now you remember last time we left off with Jacob stealing his brother's birthright and then the family blessing from Dad. Esau, of course, was the firstborn, and he was supposed to get the blessing, but Jacob tricked Dad and stole it from him. And when Esau found out, he was furious, and so he says, "When Dad dies and the time of mourning is over, I am going to kill Jacob." So Mom, Rebecca, when she found out, says, "Jacob, you got to get out of here. Go to my brother, to your uncle Laban's house, and you can stay safe there." And so we'll pick it up as we see how the family tree develops as the Lord continues to care for Jacob and keep the promise and the line of the promise alive. Remember that it all began with Abraham, whom God called out of his idolatry in the land of Ur and brought him to the land of Canaan. Abraham's wife was Sarah, and God had promised Abraham a son, and that son would be Isaac. Isaac grew up and married Rebekah, and she was unable to have children too until the Lord opened her womb and blessed them with a set of twins. That, of course, was Esau and Jacob. Esau, of course, being the firstborn and the one to inherit all the blessings, but Jacob being the deceiver who tricked his brother out of his birthright and then stole his blessing from his father. So Jacob gets to Uncle Laban's, and he sees Laban's daughter Rachel, and he says, "This is the most beautiful woman I've ever seen." He says, "Uncle Laban, I would love to marry your daughter Rachel. In fact, I will work 7 years on your farm and taking care of your sheep and all the rest of it if you will let me marry your daughter Rachel." So Uncle Laban says, "Well, who am I to object to family? So here you go. Here's my daughter after 7 years working for her." But what's this? His daughter Leah? She wasn't the good-looking one, although she was the oldest one. Jacob says, "I didn't work 7 years to marry Leah." Uncle Laban had done a switch after the wedding night. And Uncle Laban said, "We can't marry off the younger sister before the older sister." And Jacob says, "Well, fine. I'll be married to Leah, but I'll work another 7 years if I can marry your daughter Rachel." So Uncle Laban says, "Okay, another 7 years work, and you can have Rachel too." So after another 7 years of taking care of sheep and camels and goats and all the other stuff Uncle Laban had, Jacob gets to marry Rachel. Now, it turns out that Rachel was barren for a while, and the Lord blessed Leah because he knew that Jacob didn't love her as much, and so she began having children. Now, as they began having kids, it turned out that when Leah was done having kids, she said, "Jacob, you should take my maidservant Zilpah and have some kids with her." Now, I know what you're thinking. That's kind of strange. First of all, having 2 wives and then having kids with the maidservants, but the Lord allowed those things in those days in order to keep the promise going and for the sake of fulfilling his promise to Abraham and Isaac and to Jacob. Well, Rachel ends up doing the same thing and gives Jacob her servant Bilhah. So between these 4 ladies, Jacob has a bunch of kids. So the sons that were born to Leah ended up being Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun. Now you see Judah there in green because Judah was the one through whom the promise would go. Remember, we're always keeping the promise in view that someday through this whole line of people, through this whole big family, the Lord is going to send the Savior. And that is going to come, he is going to come through the line of Judah. Rachel only ended up having 2 sons, Joseph and Benjamin. And in fact, she died in childbirth while having Benjamin. This, of course, caused Jacob no end of grief and sorrow. By Leah's maidservant Zilpah, Jacob had 2 more sons, Gad and Asher. And from Bilhah, Rachel's maidservant, were born Dan and Naphtali. Now, Jacob had some daughters and so on, but the family, of course, was paying attention to the sons. And there they were, the 12 sons of Jacob. But of all the 12 sons that Jacob had, Joseph, because he was Rachel's firstborn, from Jacob's beloved wife Rachel, Joseph was always Jacob's favorite. And he was treated that way, above even his brothers. And of course, that's going to lead to all kinds of problems, which we'll come to next time. So as you can see, as Jacob's family grows, God is keeping his promise that he made way back to Abraham, that he would be the father of a great nation. Of course, Abraham's family continues to grow. But even more importantly, we see in Jacob's family that God is keeping his promise alive, keeping the promise of a Savior to come someday through that family. That promise is kept alive, and it's going to go through Judah. But now we see how God continues to preserve his people even in the midst of all kinds of trouble. And that takes us to the story of Joseph, and that's for next time. I'm Pastor Mark Buetow, and this has been another Higher Things video short.